So a lot of the digital adoption wins that we've been involved with involve a lot of digitalization of people's processes. So we're we've done some autonomous mucking and those types of projects, but most of our projects are related to automation, not automation, but digitization of forms, digitization of day-to-day paper processes that you typically do on paper, and making them go more electronic and unlocking the data a little bit further. So one of the examples, like a tangible example of a paper process going electronic, would be something like when you go, when you have these gigantic prints. When you before you go underground, a lot of the miners have these big gigantic prints that come out of the printers, and the shifter prints it, and then you roll it up, and then you take it underground, and then you find out, oh, it's an old version of the print. and, that, and but you already took the toe off, and you've already spent the money, and you've already done the wrong thing after you come back up, right? So that's an example where we implemented a blue technology called Bluebeam, where we actually got the prints on tablets with the miners, and they were able to, the planning department was able to have the prints ready to go, the most latest version. And if there was some change or questions, those, because they had tablets, they had teams implemented on the tablets, they could communicate with the planning department, and those updates could be made. Of course, if Wi-Fi was available underground, is when that is. But if Wi-Fi wasn't available underground, they could still download the prints. So instead of the shifter going to go print those large prints, bringing them back, all that time, so it saved a significant amount of time in the shifter's routine. A shifter, for people who don't know what that is a shift supervisor in a mine site. And basically, the shift supervisors loved that technology. But I do have a funny thing to say about that. And I don't know, Taylor, you probably can't find this in a jiffy, but there is a Zoolander. there's like a Zoolander cartoon that comes to mind when I think about this particular thing we deployed, because I don't know who knows this one, but it's in the Zoolander example. Zoolander looks at this model for a school, and he says, "What is this? A school for ants? It should be at least 3 times bigger." And I have to admit, I was Zoolander. Because when someone told me you could take those gigantic prints and put them in Bluebeam and go underground, I thought, how are they going to do measurements? How are they going to like know the actual distances and stuff? Because on a map, you can actually see that, like the measures are very clear. But in Bluebeam, you actually have the technology that that like, you can actually just put the scales down, and it'll tell you like the actual distances to the millimeter. So it was a very, that is one of my favorite digital adoption wins that's not very commonly adopted or used. And actually, in some sites I've seen, Asad, that they're not even doing the gigantic prints. Like a lot of some people are just flying blind, because not because of because the environment is not as complex sometimes, but in environments where there is complexity, it's extremely valuable. And like an example of the financial gain related to this is um, taking one toe off, the wrong toe off, a heading would be like $25,000 in rework, right? Just once, just doing it once is 25 grand in rework. And then it doesn't even account for, what the approach you were trying to take. It doesn't account for NPV, like the ore you were supposed to get and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't account for the frustration on the part of the employees and the supervisor. It doesn't account for a lot of other things. So that was one of my favorite examples of a technology implementation that I liked. I don't know, Rosemary, do you have one that you liked?
Well, actually, talking about Bluebeam, I liked the approach that you initiated. I remember when we were at this specific site, right, of approaching people who were handling right? This app, I mean, this software, and we were asking them, right? What is your idea? Like, what is it that you want to see, or what do
Yeah.
you want to do with that? And I think we
Mhm.
run with it, right? But
Yeah.
that is the key, I think, that you can offer, Neha, at Pace, right? You're
Yeah.
you're always thinking about the person behind the technology,
Absolutely.
because at the end, right, it's for them. It's so that they know how that technology will help them, right, improve like their daily work, and it will make actually their tasks much easier. Hmm. So I was
Absolutely.
just, while you were talking, I mean, I would like you maybe to say something about minimal viable adoption, which was also a
Yes.
huge
That's a
win with that site. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a really good point, Rosemary. And before we go, you know what I realized? I rudely did not introduce Rosemary because Asad and I know Rosemary because she's part of our team. But Rosemary is a highly qualified digital adoption specialist, and she's worked throughout our Nevada operations. And you know, she was instrumental in some of the successes we had at Barrick Gold. So thank you for taking the time to join us. And Rosemary is also going to be the course that Asad talked about. Rosemary will be one of the instructors and facilitators on the digital adoption course. So I just want to make sure I didn't forget to introduce you, Rosemary. So going back to the engaging the users and the minimum viable adoption plan. Thank you. That's really good question. So yeah, absolutely. You know, we can quantify the benefits, and I put my corporate hat on and all that stuff, but really at the end of the day, how did we come up with that use case? The guys told us, right? On the ground, they told us what they needed to do. And so what minimum viable adoption is, and what's unique about how we do technology implementation at Pace, is we take basically all the features in the software and we break it down so that at every shift the crew is expecting a change. It does take a little bit of work to build this culture into them. But yesterday I just had a conversation with a major processing organization, and it's a mining organization, but in the processing area, and they were asking, how do you make things sustainable at a site? So when you make a change, right, they're saying, oh, we made a change at this site, but you know what, if Neha leaves, it's going to go away. Oh, but if this other thing happens, it's going to go away, right? And so their big question that they were trying to answer is, how do you make sustainable change at a particular site? And the question I always ask every person that's doing technology implementation is, do you think that there's ever going to be a time where you're going to stop implementing technology completely? Right? And the obvious answer to that question is no, right?
Yeah.
So, because the obvious answer to the question is no, there's never going to be a time, then the answer simply lies in, how do you make change the norm rather than the exception? So, the minimum viable adoption plan is specifically designed to break down the specific behaviors and the adoption use cases into different shift shift lengths, shift cycles, durations. And Rosemary, what you did really well, I remember at Barrick, was you made sure that you were able to go and check that they actually did what they were supposed to do, right? So something on a minimum viable adoption plan, it could be something as simple as just log in, just log in. And Rosemary, as a digital adoption specialist, and people on Assad's team now, will basically go and be like, did you log in? And they can't hide from you, right, Rosemary?
Yeah, and believe it or not, it's something so simple, but sometimes there are issues, right, with the password. So we had to communicate with, the office, head office, to solve them out, and so because otherwise it does create frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and if you're a brilliant person, like if you're like a technologically savvy person, you're not forced into it. We give you the plan, like the crew has the plan. So if you want to jump ahead 20 steps and adopt the whole piece, you can. It's just the expectation is not there, right? The expectation. So the reason it's called minimum viable adoption is because it's designed for the minimum competency, minimum technology competency of the team. So we do not want to alienate Bob, who really doesn't have any technological skill set, or I can't remember the guy's name, but I do remember it was at one of the sites up in, it was here in Ontario, and they said, "Oh, you know, if he wants to, if there was like a document on his screen, and he needed to like change the direction, he would turn the screen to look at it differently." So there's different skill set, there's different levels. So we design it into the basically the minimum points. And the other reason it's called the minimum viable adoption is because it comes from agile. So agile is all about product development, and the way in which we deploy our methodology is informed from agile. So it's about minimum viable, meaning that the smallest common denominators that we can see, the smallest behavior changes that you can see within a team. And so when Asad's team is there observing those behavior changes, people start to notice, oh, I have the ability to observe whether I logged in or not, right? So my boss can actually see whether I logged in. My boss can actually see whether I started a particular form or something like that. So those are really good examples of minimum viable adoption. That's really the business case for it. Is you break it down to small chunks, then the supervisors start getting competent because they start saying, oh, it's just one change. I just need to know this one thing. Like they don't have to know the whole system, right? So everybody feels really confident in making that change and driving that change through.
So
No,
to
that's
your, oh, sorry, I was just gonna ask you, Neha. So to your comment on this question that you were asked about sustainable change. So how can you connect that with MBA, minimum viable
Yeah,
adoption?
thank you. I lost my train of thought. It was perfect. Thanks for clarifying, Rosemary. This is why I miss you. So basically, the sustainability is driven because the site starts to give the shifters that 5 minutes in their lineups to drive change. So once per shift, you are actually driving change. So how do you make change sustainable? Is to adopt the behavior of minimum viable adoption already in your workplace. So right now it's like if someone has to make a change, it's a change, but just create that expectation that change is happening every shift. So what was happening, so before we really formalized this, we had this theory that it could work, and we were very lucky because during the barrack days we had many mine sites to work with, and so we were many crews to work with, many shifts to work with. So the reason we recognized, oh, this is really good, is because we were doing these changes, every shift because we wanted the changes to go fast. But then we realized that when the guys would come in the next shift, they'd be like, hey, what's changing today? Like they would be asking what's changing today. And when you can create that culture of what's changing today, right? And you can measure and observe that behavioral change, that's really important. The observation of the behavioral change is really important because if you can't, if it's not an observable behavior, if it's not a digitized behavior, you can't do anything about it. You can't reinforce it, right? So it's that when we break it down to minimum viable adoption, this is totally an IP leak, as our lawyers would call it. But, but basically, it's about making those behaviors observable and partnering with the vendors to be able to see how they can make those behaviors observable.